Chippendale all had a hand in its design, and it's recognised as one of the UK's first Palladian houses.
Why does a man at the peak of his fame suddenly disappear? For 14 years and over 20 million viewers, Drew Pritchard was a fixture of the British countryside, the man in the black glasses who could spot a fortune in a pile of rust. Then, the cameras stopped. He didn't just leave Salvage Hunters, he walked away from his empire. He closed the iconic Conwy shop that had been his base for 2 decades, and, in a move that stunned the antiques world, auctioned off over 600 of his own personal items just to fund a new life. No more thrill of the chase for the cameras. No more traveling the UK in a van. Instead, Drew has retreated into a 5-story mammoth project in the city of Bath that he admits has cost him all the money he's ever had. Tonight, we're following the trail from the cobblestones of Wales to a high-stakes gamble in the West Country. What did Drew find in the archives of this new Georgian townhouse that made him quit the show for good? And what is the heartbreaking truth behind the man who has spent a lifetime fixing everything but himself? Let's find out. The boy from Conwy who saw gold in the rubble. Drew Pritchard left school at 16 with no qualifications and one obsession. Most people called it junk. He called it a living. He was born on the 24th of June, 1970, in Conwy, North Wales. A medieval walled town pressed up against the estuary. Old stone buildings everywhere, history and architecture and in the streets. For most children growing up there, it was simply the backdrop to their childhoods. That wasn't it for Drew. To him, it was an education. His father was a signwriter, self-employed, practical, the kind of man who worked with his hands and understood the value of things most people dismissed. He collected antiques, instruments, and motorbikes on the side. The vehicles belonging to dealers who came to collect their signs caught young Drew's attention early. Something about the combination of age, beauty, and mechanical history pulled at him in a way that formal schooling never managed. So, school was lost. During summer holidays, Drew and his childhood best friend John T., the same T who would later travel beside him in the Salvage Hunters van for over a decade, scoured the beaches and local tips and countryside around Glen Conwy. They looked for push bikes, car badges, oars, boat paraphernalia, anything people had thrown away. They sold what they found on the side of the road to buy sweets and magazines. That was the business model at 15 years old. Find what others have discarded. Recognize the value they missed. Turn it into something. Drew never really changed it. He just scaled it up. When he left school, he enrolled in a youth training scheme to become a stained glass restorer. His first day on the job took him to a church in Holyhead. His bosses showed him how to carefully remove the stained glass windows from the stonework before the building was demolished. They wrapped them, loaded them into the van, saved them from becoming rubble. That single day established the philosophy that would define his entire career. Things that look finished are rarely finished. Beauty doesn't end because someone stops seeing it. Years later, working independently in a room beside his father's garage, Drew was dealing in stained glass windows when a dealer pulled up in a van. When the dealer peeled back the layers of glass inside, Drew recognized them immediately. They were the same windows he had removed from the Holyhead church. And he now knew what his bosses hadn't told him that first day. They were the originals by William Morris and Edward Burne-Jones, priceless in the truest sense of the word. He bought them back, restored them, sold them. The profit was £108,000. That single transaction funded the beginning of everything. In 1987, Drew founded DP Classics alongside his partner Clive Holland. The business bought, restored, and sold classic cars and motorcycles. But antiques were always the real passion. He began collecting professionally around 1993. The operation grew steadily. Word spread within the trade about a dealer in North Wales with an unusual eye and an unusual willingness to dig through things nobody else would touch. Then came the Methodist Chapel. On the 23rd of June, 1995, the day before his 25th birthday, Drew moved into a derelict Methodist chapel in the Conwy countryside. No electricity or drains, a roof that needed complete replacement. Most people would have walked away before they got through the door. Drew spent the next 2 decades transforming it. He used almost exclusively salvaged, reclaimed, and antique materials throughout. Ecclesiastical relics, reclaimed stone, pieces accumulated from years of dealing and collecting. The finished property became something buyers reportedly had their agents urgently chasing. Drew sold it eventually for £795,000. The chapel wasn't just a home, it was a proof of concept, a demonstration that the philosophy worked at every scale. That patience, knowledge, and a genuine eye for what others had discarded could turn complete ruin into something extraordinary. That philosophy is what television cameras eventually came looking for. But the life Drew was building in Conwy had a private side that the cameras were about to make very public indeed. There was a woman at the center of it, a business partner who knew the trade as well as he did. A marriage that would eventually become one of the most watched relationships on British antiques television, and an ending that nobody in the audience saw coming until it was already done. Salvage Hunters and the making of a TV legend. Most antique dealers work in quiet rooms, cataloging, waiting, hoping the right buyer calls. Drew Pritchard worked in front of 22 million people.
Chippendale all had a hand in its design, and it's recognized as one of the UK's first.
That shift happened in November 2011 when Salvage Hunters premiered on Quest TV. Discovery Networks International had commissioned what they described as a modern-day treasure hunting series. The format was deceptively simple. Drew traveled Britain in his van, hunting through barns, private estates, auction houses, salvage yards, and country mansions for forgotten pieces with hidden value. Haggling, buying, bringing things home, watching his team restore them, and selling at a profit. Simple on paper, magnetic on screen. The reason it worked wasn't the format. Dozens of shows have used that format. It worked because it was Drew himself. He brought something that television antiques programs had been quietly missing for years. He brought genuine expertise, delivered without pretension, and wasn't performing for the camera. Drew actually had it. 30 years of accumulated understanding about what things were, where they came from, what made them significant, and crucially, what they were worth to the right person. That combination of depth and accessibility is rarer than it sounds. His childhood friend John T. joined the show from season 2 onward, appearing in 81 episodes across the show's run as driver, deliverer, and an easy on-screen presence that balanced Drew's intensity with something warmer and more relaxed. The chemistry between them was unforced. Two men who had been scouring North Wales for forgotten treasure since they were teenagers, now doing it in front of cameras with a budget and a production team behind them. The audience felt the authenticity of that immediately. But there was another presence on screen that the audience found equally compelling. Drew Pritchard, Drew's wife, research expert, valuations specialist, the person waiting at the base while Drew was out on the road, providing the historical and commercial context for everything he brought back.
And a good profit.
Over to you, really.
Rebecca appeared in 46 episodes of Salvage Hunters across its run. She also fronted Salvage Hunters, The Restorers, a spin-off that aired from 2018 to 2024, featuring 27 episodes. Her knowledge of restoration and valuation was genuine and deep. She wasn't a supporting character added for domestic warmth, but a real practitioner whose expertise genuinely shaped the business that the cameras were documenting. The personal and professional entanglement of being married to your co-star creates a particular kind of television. Audiences feel the texture of a real relationship in ways that perform differently from anything a producer can script. The rhythms of how people who genuinely know each other speak and move and disagree and laugh together are impossible to manufacture convincingly. Drew and Rebecca had that, and viewers responded to it in significant numbers. By its peak, Salvage Hunters was attracting 22 million viewers across 52 countries. A show about a Welsh antiques dealer in a van had become a genuinely global phenomenon. It ran for 20 series, 245 episodes, 14 years of consistent production without any meaningful drop in audience engagement. That is not luck. That is a format that genuinely works, built around a person who genuinely belongs on screen. Drew's philosophy about the show was inflexible and important. "This isn't bargain hunt," he said publicly more than once. Everything bought on screen was bought with real money from real pockets. The production company paid wages. It did not pay for the stock. Every purchase was a genuine risk with genuine consequences. If Drew bought something that didn't sell, he absorbed the loss personally. That financial reality kept every transaction honest. The haggling wasn't a performance. The hesitation before a big purchase wasn't drama. It was a man genuinely calculating whether he could make the number work. Audiences can feel that distinction. They might not be able to articulate it, but they feel it. And it is what kept them watching episode after episode across 14 years.
Hatchback, the Renault Clio Williams.
Oh my life, this is brilliant.
The show expanded into spin-offs. Salvage Hunters. Classic cars ran alongside the main series, merging Drew's passion for vintage vehicles with his antiques expertise. The Restorers gave Rebecca her own platform. The brand grew outward from the original format without ever losing the authenticity at its center. 22 million viewers, 52 countries, 14 years. Not bad for a boy from Conwy who left school with nothing but an eye for what others had discarded. But behind the camaraderie, the treasure hunting, and the rating success, something in Drew's personal life was fracturing, quietly at first, then very publicly, and in a way that would change everything about the show and the man who carried it. The divorce, the scandal, and the public fallout. The antiques trade teaches you to spot cracks before they break. Drew Pritchard didn't see this one coming, or if he did, he didn't move fast enough to stop it. By 2016, something had shifted in the dynamic that viewers had been watching for years. Rebecca's appearances on Salvage Hunters were becoming less frequent. The easy rhythm that had made their on-screen partnership feel so natural was registering differently. Nobody said anything publicly. Nobody ever does, at first. Then 2017 arrived, and everything came apart. Drew and Rebecca Pritchard divorced after a marriage that had lasted more than 2 decades. They had met through the antiques world in the early 1990s. Together, they built a business. They had 2 children together, Tom, born in 1999, and Grace, whose exact age has always been kept carefully out of the public eye. The divorce was not clean. It was not quiet. It made the tabloids in a way that a man who had always maintained strict privacy about his personal life was entirely unprepared for. The central issue that became public involved an alleged affair. Drew and a woman named Amanda Thomas had reportedly been involved for around 2.5 years. Amanda was married to Janice Bryn Thomas, the managing director of a crane company, a man whose son was best friends with Drew's son. The connection between the families made the situation considerably more complicated and more painful than a straightforward affair might have been. When the affair ended, Amanda told her husband. Janice agreed to try to rebuild their marriage, and for 2.5 years after the disclosure, he managed to keep his reaction contained. Then came the Liverpool Arms pub in Conwy in October 2017. Janice Thomas saw Drew Pritchard in the beer garden. Court records later described Drew as smirking at him. Whatever the precise sequence of events, Janice swung out with his left hand and hit him hard enough to knock him to the ground. Drew dropped his glasses and his drink. He was left with a sore head, a cut on his elbow, and pain in his jaw. Other drinkers had to pull Thomas off him. The case went to the Llandudno Magistrates Court. Janice Thomas admitted to common assault and threatening behavior. He was fined £1,440 in total. He was placed on Conwy's pub watch scheme. The restraining order Drew had applied for was not granted. He did not attend the hearing. What he did do, according to court records, was send a text message after the attack, one that Thomas's solicitor described as goading. Drew reportedly called Thomas a coward and referred to the affair. A criminal investigation into the messages was mentioned in court proceedings. None of this made for comfortable reading, for Drew personally, or for the production company that had built a wholesome antiques brand around his public image. Drew stayed silent through all of it. He did not give interviews, nor did he release statements. He absorbed the coverage and kept working. That silence was both a personal choice and a necessity. No version of this story played well in the press. The best option was to say nothing and let time move it off the front pages. Rebecca, to her credit, handled the situation with equal composure. She said nothing publicly about the specifics of what had happened. Also, she made the remarkable decision to continue working with Drew on Salvage Hunters for several years after the divorce was finalized. Appearing in 46 episodes in total across the show's full run, providing expertise, maintaining professionalism, demonstrating a level of practical dignity that the tabloids consistently failed to acknowledge because it made for a less interesting story than conflict. It wasn't until a Telegraph interview in May 2023 that Drew spoke at any length about what the period had cost him personally. He described having a blip in the middle of everything when it all got too much. According to him, he wanted to start again from scratch. He described his new life as sparse, simple, and straightforward, and he revealed that he had quit drinking around 2021 while working through the reset. Sparse, simple, straightforward. 3 words that tell an entire story for anyone willing to read them carefully. But the divorce was only the first of several upheavals heading Drew's way. The next one would cost him considerably more than his marriage. It would cost him a home, a collection, and very nearly the financial stability he had spent 4 decades building, selling everything and starting again. Most people downsize gradually. A room at a time, a possession here, an old habit there. Small concessions to a life that is quietly shifting direction. Drew Pritchard sold decades of his life in a single auction and never looked back. That is not a metaphor. It is what actually happened. After the divorce was settled and the dust of 2017 began to clear, Drew made a decision that surprised even people who knew him well. He was leaving Conwy, not just the shop or the house. He was leaving the entire life he had built in North Wales across 4 decades of dealing, collecting, restoring, and accumulating. He was starting again from zero, at 52 years old.
A wonderful thing. It may be one of the best ones left in existence.
The first visible sign of this came in May 2022, when the Drew Pritchard Antiques shop on the high street of Conwy permanently closed its doors. The shop had been at that location since 2017, after years of operating from a unit near Glan Conwy, where his reputation had been built. It was a landmark in the local antiques world, a destination, the physical home base of everything Salvage Hunters had shown the world. Gone, Drew shifted operations online and began looking for somewhere new. But the really significant move came that same year when he purchased a 5-story Grade I listed Georgian townhouse in Bath, Somerset. £1.5 million, a property he described publicly as the worst house in the best location. That description was not false modesty. The building had been divided into 5 badly converted flats during the 1970s. Decades of shoddy workmanship layered over what had once been one of the finest houses in one of Britain's most architecturally significant cities. Restoring it to anything close to its original state would require extraordinary commitment and lots of patience. It would turn out to require more money than Drew had. This is the part that the audience didn't fully see until the Salvage Hunters special, titled Georgian House Restoration, aired in February 2025. Drew sat on camera and admitted something that would have been almost unthinkable from the man who had built a career on making things work with whatever resources were available. The money had run out. His initial restoration budget of £200,000 had been exhausted just 10 months into the project. He had applied for a bridging loan, rejected. He had reached the limit on his credit cards, maxed out, and the building was still far from finished. There had been sleepless nights and a lot of worry, he told the cameras. He couldn't back out, but there was no magic money tree.
Up and put them in there, and over the years it got forgotten about, and then
His master builder, Kieran Dixon Squire, had to be told the situation directly. There is nothing left in the wallet, Drew said. It is empty. Something had to give. And what was the collection? The Drew Eats auction in Berkshire ran across 2 full days. Around 600 lots went under the hammer. Pieces accumulated across 30 years of professional dealing and personal collecting. A fossilized skull of an Irish elk, 18th century French furniture, rare motoring memorabilia, Mick Jagger's ornate lavatory, which had become something of a signature piece in the Conwy showroom over the years, ecclesiastical items sourced from decades of church clearances and estate sales. The cameras had always shown Drew finding treasure in other people's discarded lives. Now he was selling his own. The auction raised over £800,000, enough to push the Bath project forward. They raised more than enough to keep the restoration moving through the remaining phases. Drew spoke about the decision with the same plain-spoken directness he brought to everything. He was clearing out the old to make room for the new, even though he had cherished old things since childhood. But making a fresh start was the one new thing he had decided to relish. Better to move on, get the deal done, progress to the next item. That is the philosophy of a man who has spent his entire life understanding that things have value only when they find the right owner at the right time, including the things he had built his identity around. The bathhouse was not just a restoration project, it was a statement, a declaration that Drew Pritchard was not finished, that the divorce and the scandal and the financial strain and the 50-plus years had not taken the fundamental thing from him, the belief that something broken and overlooked can always be made into something worth having. But even as that statement was taking shape in Bath, another announcement was forming, one that would stun everyone who had followed him across 14 years of television. And nobody saw it coming until the Instagram video appeared. The final bow, leaving Salvage Hunters after 14 years. 245 episodes, 14 years, 20 series. And then, one Instagram video stunned everyone watching. In April 2025, Drew Pritchard sat down in a vintage leather armchair inside his partially restored Bath townhouse. He put on his trademark black glasses and looked directly into the camera. After this, he told the world he was done.
Sellers.
He had filmed the 20th series of Salvage Hunters. It was already in the can. It would air in the autumn, and that would be his last. That was it. No elaborate press release. There was no tearful goodbye, specially engineered by the production company. An Instagram video from a man sitting in an armchair. In a house he was still putting back together. It was so completely on brand for Drew Pritchard that it almost hurt to watch. The announcement hit the Salvage Hunters audience immediately and hard. Social media was flooded with responses within hours of the video going viral. Viewers who had been watching Drew travel Britain in his van since 2011 processed the news with a combination of genuine shock and something that felt more personal than a typical celebrity farewell usually generates. Because Drew Pritchard wasn't a celebrity in the conventional sense, he was a craftsman who had let the cameras watch him work, and there is a different quality of feeling that is produced when it ends. His reasons were honest and straightforward, as everything he said publicly tended to be. The Georgian house restoration in Bath still needed his full attention. The Tetbury shop was newly opened and required his presence. He wanted more time with his classic cars. He was 54 years old and had been on the road filming television for 15 of those years, and was ready to focus on the things that felt most authentic to him at this particular point in his life. Those are not complicated reasons. They are not dramatic. They are the reasons of a man who has paid close enough attention to his own life to know when a chapter has genuinely ended. He spoke about the production team at Curve Media with a warmth that registered as completely genuine. Many crew members had been with the show from day one, 15 to 16 years of working alongside the same people. He called it a very special and rare thing in television. Later, he thanked them specifically and at length. He spoke about the antiques trade itself, with the same conviction that had made the show worth watching for 14 years. When he got the gig, he said, he had been determined to give as honest a representation of the trade as he possibly could, and he believed he had done that. For a teenager who left school at 16 with no qualifications, the transformation that Salvage Hunters had made possible was significant in ways that go beyond the television audience figures. It had gotten him his position as a respected dealer in a world that had always taken him seriously on his own merits. Salvage Hunters introduced his expertise to 22 million viewers across 52 countries. It had turned architectural salvage from a niche trade interest into something that a substantial portion of the British public now understood and cared about. That is not a small legacy. It is a body of work. He also addressed the show's future directly and specifically. Alistair Dryburgh, Vicky Knott, a new dealer whose name hadn't been announced yet. He told his audience to give them a chance, just as they had given him one at the beginning. He said trusting him would be worth it. The final episode of Series 20 aired on the 25th of September, 2025. Drew Pritchard's last appearance on Salvage Hunters as its host was not marked by any particular production ceremony. The show continued its format. The credits rolled, and that was that. Quietly done, completely on his terms. The same way he had always insisted on doing everything that mattered to him. But walking away from Salvage Hunters was not the end of Drew Pritchard's story. It was simply the beginning of the most interesting chapter yet. one that involves a 5-story Georgian house in one of Britain's most beautiful cities, a brand new shop in the Cotswolds, and a man who hasn't for a single moment stopped doing the thing that has defined his entire life. Finding beauty in what other people have left behind. The man who keeps starting again. After the divorce, the scandal, and the money running out, the cameras finally stopped rolling. Where did Drew Pritchard actually go? That question has been sitting underneath this entire story. And in 2026, the answer is taking shape in a way that is considerably more interesting than most people expected from a man who had just stepped away from 14 years of television. Let's start with the bathhouse, because that is still the center of everything. Drew is now in his 4th year of restoring the grade. I listed Georgian townhouse on what he described as the worst street in the best location. In early 2026, he posted an update on Instagram that gave his followers a glimpse of where things stood. 4 years in, tantalizingly close to the end. His words, not there yet. But close enough that he could see what he had been working toward, through all the sleepless nights and the empty wallet and the auction that stripped his collection back to almost nothing. The ethos throughout has never wavered. Only reclaimed materials and salvaged, antique, and ethically sourced elements throughout the entire building. Every room and surface, every fixture and fitting. The philosophy of his entire career applied to his own home, at the most demanding scale he had ever attempted. The results, judging by the room revealed on Instagram, are extraordinary. Sophisticated and layered in the way that only genuine knowledge can produce. Not a showroom aesthetic, but a lived-in intelligence. Each space speaks to a man who has spent his entire adult life understanding how beautiful things work together. He has also hinted at what might come next with the building. Other derelict properties are catching his eye, he said publicly. Should he sell the bathhouse once it is finished, or simply live in it? He did not answer the question. He just put it out there, the way a dealer does when they are not entirely sure themselves. That uncertainty is part of the portrait. The Tetbury shop is the other major development of the current chapter. Drew Pritchard Antiques opened on Long Street in the Cotswold town of Tetbury on November 2025. The location is significant. Tetbury is not a compromise or a consolation. It is arguably the most concentrated antiques market in the entire country. Some of Britain's finest dealers operate within 50 yards of each other on the same street. Drew described feeling blessed to be among them. In Conwy, he had been the dominant name in a regional scene. In Tetbury, he was joining a national one. The ambition behind that move is not subtle. Early reports from the shop's first months of trading in 2026 are encouraging. Strong foot traffic, regular stock turnover. Drew described the showroom as constantly changing, with new items arriving daily, a grocer's shop of antiques, as he put it. The same instinct that made the television format work, the constant movement, the daily hunt, the unpredictability of what would come through the door next, applied now to a physical retail space in the Cotswolds. His net worth, as of 2026, is estimated at between $8 and $10 million, though the more accurate description of his financial position is asset-rich and cash-poor. The Bath townhouse alone, once fully restored, is expected to be worth between £2.5 and £3 million based on comparable Bath properties. He bought it for £1.5 million. The difference represents years of extraordinary work applied to an extraordinary building. His relationship status remains exactly what it was when the television cameras were rolling, private, unconfirmed. His Instagram account, of 185,000 followers, focuses exclusively on antiques, architectural finds, and restoration updates. No partner photographs, no anniversary posts, and definitely no evidence of the remarriage that various unverified online sources have been claiming for 2 years. He said in his most honest public statement on the subject that he had started again from scratch. His new life was sparse, simple, and straightforward. Those are not the words of a man making a public show of moving on. They are the words of someone who has genuinely made peace with who he is on his own terms. Drew Pritchard left school at 16, with nothing but an eye for what other people had discarded. At 55, he is still doing exactly that. In a different town, with a different shop. In the house, he is still slowly putting back together. Some people never really change. With Drew Pritchard, that turns out to be entirely the point. Drew Pritchard never needed the television to be who he is. The cameras found him. He let them in for 14 years and gave 22 million people an honest window into a trade he loves, with a genuineness that most television never manages to capture. After this, he walked away on his own terms into a half-finished Georgian house, with an empty wallet and a new shop 50 minutes down the road. That is not a sad ending. It is a Drew Pritchard ending, which means it is probably a beginning. If this story reminded you of why Drew was impossible not to watch, tell us your favorite Salvage Hunters moment in the comments below, and share this with someone who needs to see it.